I am the angel of death. Some call me the grim reaper. And I stand at your door. One day, each and every one of you will see me face to face. You cannot escape my grasp. Some of you say you do not fear me. Go ahead, say it. But I know that when you sit in a doctor's office and hear the word cancer, you're afraid. You're very afraid. When you're sitting in your chair and you have your chest pains and your left arm goes numb, you are afraid. Very afraid. Oh, you say, even though you walk through my valley, the valley of the shadow of death, you say you won't be afraid, but when your time comes, you are afraid. You say you're not afraid, but when I take your mom, when I take your father, when I take your husband, when I come for your wife, and when I come for your child, you are afraid. Do not mock me by saying you are not afraid of me. For I am the angel of death, and I will have my way with you. I will have my victory. Oh, you think to yourselves you'll have a nice, peaceful death surrounded by loved ones when you take that final breath, but you have no control. You might drown. You might be in a car accident. You might be the victim of a senseless gunshot in a school or a movie theater or on the side of the road. And if you do, if you are, I will be there to take you away. I remember my first one. It was a murder. A murder. The first death on the planet was a brother filled with jealousy, filled with rage and envy, and he took the life of his own brother, killed him in cold blood, and I was there to take him away. Sometimes it's one by one, house by house. And sometimes it's entire villages that I come for. One of my finest days, there was a great flood. There was a great flood over all the earth. The people had been warned that a flood was coming. They had their opportunity to save themselves. But there were only a few who got on a boat. Noah and his family. The rest mocked him. But when the rains came and they drowned in the flood, I was there to reap the harvest. Sometimes great nations with great kings have been unmerciful in the way that they kill people. Over the course of history, the Egyptians, they were a mighty, mighty nation. And they went and they conquered the entire Middle East. And if you tried to defy them, if you tried to fight against them, they would wipe out every member of your family and every person in your village. And I came. Oh, the Egyptians, the Pharaoh was their god. But one by one, each Pharaoh would die and belong to me. And I would take him to Sheol, the grave, the abyss. They wrapped their leaders in cloth and buried them in mighty tombs, but they were still mine. They still belonged to me. Then the Egyptians had the tables turned on them one day. I was summoned to go to every house in the land of Egypt, go from house to house, and there strike down the firstborn son of every house. Oh, what a glorious night it was to hear the moms scream, to hear the fathers defenseless as they watched their sons die, to see the brothers and the sisters watch their oldest brother die. They had no answer for me. And the entire nation wailed and moaned and mourned the death of the firstborn in each household. But I was not able to penetrate every household in Egypt. For there were some households who had marked their doors with the blood of the Lamb. And when I came to this household, I was forbidden to go past the blood of the Lamb. The blood of the Lamb saved the firstborn of those households. But it was only temporary. They thought they were spared for the night, and they were. But when they left Egypt and they refused to go into the promised land, I picked them off one by one for the next 40 years. In their stubbornness, they refused to enter the promised land. And they died in a lonely desert, wandering and wondering. You say you are not afraid of death. You say you are not afraid when death will come, but you are. You're afraid of how I might come. You're afraid of when I might come. You're afraid of who I might come to before I come for you. You say it's an injustice for the children to die. I could care less. I am no respecter of age. I am no respecter for the color of your skin. I come for you. I come for everyone. A few have evaded me. One, Elijah, escaped my grasp, was taken up to heaven. But it is appointed that everyone should die once. So I must wait. I must wait for the day that I have Elijah in my grasp. And then came one born during the Roman period. I loved the Romans. They were greater than the Assyrians. They were greater than the Egyptians. The Assyrians, they had a wonderful way to kill their enemies. They would impale them. They'd put a stake through their chest and lift them high and carry them around like trophies while they suffered and died and breathed their last, and I came for them on the poles. But the Romans took delight in killing people. The Romans had no mercy. They formed what's called the crucifixion, where they put people on the crosses, sometimes hundreds at a time. The whole road from a village leading out would be filled with hundreds of people being crucified as a reminder of how powerful I am and how powerful the Romans are. There was no mercy for you. And it was in the Roman Empire in a far-off place called Bethlehem that a certain baby was born, a baby that some claimed that it was the Son of God. It was the Messiah, that he was the chosen one. That made no difference to me. There had been many chosen ones before him. There had been many sons of God before him, and they all belonged to me. The Pharaohs thought they were gods. The Caesars thought they were gods, but they were not. And I stood at the door, and when they died, I took them away to Sheol, the grave. It made no difference that wise men from the east bowed down to him. It made no difference to me that angels announced his birth. It made no difference to me that angels from the fields came to worship him. It is appointed that everyone should die once, and he belonged to me. Bethlehem, how lucky you are! You are the one who hosted the birth of the King of the Jews. And what is your reward? Every child, male, 2 years and younger, shall meet me. Oh yes, that was the edict of Herod, the Jewish king. And he sent soldiers into Bethlehem, and they went from house to house and door to door, and they slaughtered the babies in the arms of their mothers. And the men, the fathers, were defenseless. They had no recourse. Every baby died. It reminded me of the Egyptians when they tried to do the same thing to the Hebrews. Every male child that was born was thrown into the Nile. You think I cared? Oh, Bethlehem, how lucky you were. And when Jesus was taken to Egypt, he was insignificant. And when they came back, they were in Nazareth. He was a Nazarene, the son of a carpenter. He was no threat to me. He began teaching. They called him rabbi. Oh, he had a few miracles, but certainly I'd seen those before. But I thought this one particular miracle, things might get interesting. There was a centurion that came to Jesus. I was standing at the door of his daughter's bedroom, and the centurion begged Jesus to heal his daughter. But before Jesus could get there, I took her instead. I had her in my grasp, and Jesus sat down behind her bed and took her hand and said, "Little girl, wake up." And I lost her. But I knew it was only temporary. His friends had sent for him once. Their brother was dying. And die he did. Lazarus. I had a grip of Lazarus. 1 day went by. 2 days went by. 3 days went by, and I knew he was mine. And when Jesus came back to see Mary and Martha, he wept like a child. Let me see what he's going to do about this. And he had the tomb opened. And he commanded, "Lazarus, come out." And I lost him. But I knew it was only temporary. I knew I would have Lazarus again. For it is appointed that every person shall die. Every person shall die. Everyone belongs to me. Well, Jesus made some enemies. And whenever someone makes enemies, enemies that want to kill somebody, I know that I will be called upon. And you know what they did. They got one of his own followers to betray him. They paid him 30 pieces of silver. 30 pieces of silver, can you believe it? 30 pieces of silver is what you pay for a servant. The Son of God was reduced to a servant. The Son of God was reduced to be betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. A meager amount for what would come. And so when he was handed over to the Jewish leaders, And the Jewish leaders said he must die. I watched it. When the Jewish leaders turned him over to the Romans, I knew it was close. And when even Pilate found him to be not guilty, and he asked the people, what shall I do with Jesus, your king, the king of the Jews? What did they say? We have no king but Caesar. Crucify him! Crucify him! Crucify him! So I stood, and I watched him beaten within an inch of his life. And I thought I might take him before he made it to the cross. But he survived, bleeding, with a crown of thorns on his head, with his beard pulled out. He was spit on, he was mocked, and he was ridiculed. And I could care less. And they nailed him to the cross, and I knew his time was short. And as he pushed himself up by his feet that was nailed to that board to catch a grasp the air. Only to collapse back on the nail until he could push himself up again to breathe again. And I watched him struggle. And I watched the two thieves on each side with the same struggle. And when Jesus breathed his last, I had my grip on him. And I held tightly. This Jesus who could raise the dead was now dead himself. And I escorted him to the grave, to Sheol, where all who die go. And there he was in the tomb. 1 day, 2 days. But on the 3rd day, I held tightly. For he had predicted in 3 days he would rise again. And I knew this was the crucial day. If I could get through this day, he would be mine forever. But I could not hold him. I could not have a grip on him. It did not last. And this was different than Lazarus. This was different than the little girl. I knew that I would lose my grip on Jesus of Nazareth forever. And he was resurrected from the tomb. And the stone was rolled away. And he came out. Resurrected, alive. He was not dead, and he would never experience me again. But I knew that I needed to go after his followers. And the Romans were very, very good about killing the followers. If they killed you as a rebel leader, they were going to come after your followers next. And I found them hidden and scared of me, scared of crucifixion, scared of the Roman soldiers, scared of dying. The windows were drawn, the curtains were drawn, the doors were locked, and a pound at the door came. It was their female friends who dared to say, he is not dead, he is alive, he is risen, come and see where they lay his body. It's gone. Only a few went. The others stayed back. They remained scared. And those who went did not understand what they saw until that night. Jesus appeared before them, and I knew I was in trouble. But I waited. I waited until I could get one of them to show them that this Jesus who escaped my grasp could not save them. And it came with Stephen. Stephen started proclaiming Jesus as the Son of God. I see Jesus standing at the right hand of God, the Father Almighty. And the people were enraged, and they picked up stones, and they threw it at him, and they were stoning him to death. And when he gasped his last breath of air, I went to grab Stephen, and I could not get him. He escaped my grasp. For Jesus came and claimed him for his own. These followers of Jesus Christ no longer feared me. These followers of Jesus Christ believed in this resurrected Jesus. They believed that he had defeated me. He believed that he was the Son of God. And one by one, I saw them die. I saw them die horrible deaths, crucified upside down, filleted, their skin filleted while they were alive. I saw them die horrible deaths. And when they breathed their last, I could not get them in my grasp, for Jesus was there with them. I followed Saul around. Saul, the persecutor of Christians. Saul, the mighty, righteous Pharisee and Jew. He went from town to town with orders to persecute and exterminate all Christians in the towns surrounding Jerusalem. And I went with him from town to town. I was there watching him approve the stoning of Stephen. And then on a road, on his way to persecute Christians, the risen Jesus appeared to him, and he became a follower. And now he went from town to town telling people about the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. He even mocked me. Paul, where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? For the victory is in Jesus Christ. And there was nothing I could do about it. Oh, don't worry. There are many of those who I still have in my grip. There are many of those who have not confessed Jesus. There are many who are not following the Son of God. There are many who do not believe in the resurrection. There are many who not put their faith in the cross to forgive them of their sins. And they all belong to me. Even some of you. Even some of you who claim to be followers of Jesus Christ, yet you are so casual in your faith. You are so casual in your following. You will be very surprised at the words of Jesus when he says, "You wicked servant, I never knew you." Then you belong to me. And you thought you were going to hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant." How many surprised victims have I taken? Too many to count. For it is appointed that you shall die once, and after that face judgment. Oh, you may say you do not fear death, but you do. You may say you do not fear judgment, but be afraid. Be very afraid. For if you are found guilty, your eternity is spent with me. And you will be judged for every action, every deed, everything you've ever done from the time of your birth to the time of your death. And I know what you're going to do. You're going to hide behind those good things that you did. You're going to hide behind those good deeds that you've had. But you can't. Because all of your sins are exposed. Everything you've done to disobey God, laid before his feet. And you are judged guilty. You are judged for every word that you say, from the time of your birth to the time of your death. Every time you've blasphemed God, every time you've taken the name of God in vain, you shall be judged. But not only for that, but for every lie that you spill, for the gossip that you share about other people, for the slander that you commit behind the backs of those who you've earned their trust. You shall be judged for every word that you have spoken, and you shall be found guilty. But it doesn't stop there. For on judgment day you will be judged for every thought that you think. And you might hide behind, well, I didn't do it. I didn't say it, but you thought it. And all your thoughts are exposed before God. Yes, on the day of wrath, he will also judge you for your attitudes. Attitudes of humility, you may hide behind. But your attitude of pride and arrogance, your attitude of hate, your attitude of prejudice, your biases, all of those will be laid before God and exposed. And he will then judge you for your motives. From the time of your birth to the time of your death, have you been selfless? For if you have been found selfish, you will be found guilty. And you belong to me. And I will come for you. I will stand at your door. And I'm a very, very patient entity. And I will wait for you to breathe your last. And I will take you to Sheol. I don't care how you die. I don't care if you're alone or surrounded by loved ones. I don't care if it's a car crash or in the comfort of a bed. You belong to me. But I have discovered that I have no power over those who are marked with the blood of the Lamb. I should have seen it coming in the days of Egypt, when I went from house to house and door to door. But those who had been marked with the blood of the Lamb, I was not allowed to touch. And when Jesus died on that cross and shed his blood, those who believe in the resurrection, those who confess Jesus as Lord, they will escape my grip. For Jesus will come to claim them, and I have no power over them. For I have discovered that those who follow Jesus are not judged by their deeds, or their words, or their thoughts, or their attitudes, or their motives. For when they are fully followers of Jesus, they are judged by the blood of the Lamb. They are judged by what Jesus did, not what they have done. It is appointed that everyone should die once, and after that, face judgment. If you belong to Jesus, you will be found not guilty. But if you do not belong to Jesus, you belong to me. And believe me, I know the difference. You cannot hide behind false words. We live in a day that mocks death. We live in a day that makes fun of death. We live in a day where people dress up in grisly characters, pretending to be evil, but they know nothing of evil. We celebrate the harvesting of the dead by going to get candy. But let it be a reminder that this is not a game. Death is real. And the only escape is faith in Jesus. Choose this day whom you shall serve. If you do not belong to Jesus,